Hello and welcome to the Apologetics 315 podcast with your hosts Brian Auten and Chad Gross. Join us for conversations and interviews on the topics of apologetics, evangelism, and the Christian worldview.
Ray, when someone asks you, do you believe in God? You say, yes!
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Chad Gross. How are you, Chad?
I'm doing well. Podcast is always a highlight of the week, so I'm looking forward to talking to our guest today, who's doing some great stuff.
Yes, I first heard about this guest by some post that someone linked to. Maybe it was you on Facebook.
I think it was me.
Yeah, it was a YouTube video.
Yeah.
And as I watched this, I was like, wow, this is a really succinct answer to a particular question. I think it was, how we used to talk about in the early days of our reboot. We talked about this extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And this was a video after all of our talk. And it was like, wow, that was great. And it was animated and things like that. And the video was amazing. So I subscribed to this YouTube channel. It's called Testify. Just search Testify on YouTube. And so as I subscribed to it, then kind of, I don't know who subscribes to these sorts of things. I do, and so I kind of like started watching the backlog, and then the new ones would come out and like, these are great. I mean, maybe 5-6 minute videos. I don't know how many, you watched many of them, Chad?
Yes, I've watched a few.
I'm like, wow, this has been going on for a while. And it's like cranking them out at a good pace. And the quality is good. And the thumbnails are awesome. Like little meme type things, like maybe Peter S. Williams with shades on them and stuff. What is the shades called? Like gangsta sort of things,
yeah.
Thug Life glasses.
That's
Thug
right.
Life glasses. Yeah.
Gotta search Thug Life and yeah.
Well, here's our guest. His none other than Erik Manning. Erik, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's a real honor.
Oh yeah, we're excited to have you.
Really excited to hear about, what you're doing with this channel. You've also got a website, and we'll point people there. But tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not the most interesting guy in the world. I got 5 kids. My wife runs a business out of our home. Just help her with that and homeschool our kids together. And I got onto apologetics just mostly out of being hit with questions that I really couldn't answer. I was working a job, and it was with a couple of guys that the conversation shifted to spiritual things. And one of the guys was like, extremely educated, really into science. And he just trashed my beliefs, and I didn't know how to really answer what he had to say. And then the other guy was a son of missionaries, and he basically ripped me up one side and down the other with just questions I couldn't answer. And I was like, that sucked. I don't want that to ever happen again.
Yeah.
So that really kind of got me on a mission as far as studying apologetics and just wanting to be much better prepared. Because I had been to Bible school. I did graduate at Bible school and just had been working, kind of in my church, helping out and different things. Just some of these tougher questions, I didn't really run across them too often. And it just was a bad feeling, just not really knowing what to say to people. And so that's what really piqued my interest in apologetics.
Uh-huh. So how long ago was that? And where did you start?
That was probably about 8, 9, maybe 10 years ago. And I just jumped online and I just started searching, Google and everything else like that. And I came across, a few ministries that I saw on YouTube, like some clips of videos, and some of the answers that were being given. I thought, well, this is really cool. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And I actually, Brian, stumbled across your website, and that was a gold mine. I mean, you had so many things on there, like entire classes. I think I devoured that class by Doug Grutheis.
Oh yeah.
I listened to a ton of your podcasts. So I think it's like really kind of cool that I get to be able to talk to you, because I remember just listening to your podcast so much while I was like doing work in the background and everything else like that. And so just finding like Dr. Craig's answers, he's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. There was like the Dr. Craig videos and stuff. And
yeah.
And then just digging deeper, finding more resources, and you just kind of go down the rabbit hole, and there's just more to find. It can kind of almost be overwhelming, so yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your ministry on YouTube and your ministry and your website, the name of your ministry?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the name of the website is JesusAlive.com. And I just picked that name because I just thought, well, the domain is available, and shoot, that's a good question. And so I just grabbed it. Didn't really think about branding later, which the YouTube channel is a different name, Testify.
Yeah.
But I just thought, hey, that's a good search term, and I'll just grab the name. And I put together initially just the website as just basically like a digital track. If you go to the website, it's just kind of like introduces the argument for the resurrection and then just takes you through step by step different evidences for the resurrection and ultimately to the gospel and different things like that. Later on, I just started writing a blog post like once, maybe twice a week at the most. And I did that for about 3 years. I knew I was I just had like this sense that I needed to be writing, but I put it off for a very long time, but I finally did it. And it was kind of the same experience with the YouTube channel. I just felt like, I know I need to be doing this. I have a sense like maybe God's leading me to do this, but I just was like, well, I don't know. What else could I say? And there's just so much on YouTube. Who's ever even going to find me? But I just went ahead and stepped out and started making videos really just based on a lot of the writings that I'd already been doing for the last 3 years. And the name Testify, I just figured, hey, the gospel is their testimony. And I want to be able to defend the gospels. And eventually one of the things that I'd really like to work into the channel is, and in my last video, I kind of did a little bit, is testimonies, things that happen today. A lot of times skeptics are like, hey, you claim that there was these miracles that happened in the past and you defend them, but that stuff we don't really see that stuff today. And it's like, well, how hard have you really looked? Because, there's things like Craig Keener's 2-volume work on miracles that's just got just tons of amazing documented cases. And I shared a little bit of a testimony in my last video. And I just want to get that kind of stuff out there, that God is working back in the past and God is working today, and that there's good evidence, there's good reasons to believe that. So that's where the name came from. And that's just kind of how I started out with that. So.
Right. So the website is JesusAlive.com, right?
Right. Yep.
And of course, the YouTube channel is Testify. Just wanted to make sure listeners, just because of the two different names, that listeners understood that. So when they go look up your stuff, and I will tell you, both resources are extremely helpful. Nice, concise answers. A lot of times, too, you have people who aren't willing to look at, they're not readers as much. People aren't readers as much as they used to be. And so these short little 5-6 minute videos are great to like send along to people and kind of online evangelism tools. So highly recommended. Yeah.
The name change, I always feel a little bit funny about. I always joke around. I'm like I don't know if you guys ever watched Parks and Rec, but I feel like I'm the mouse rat of Christian apologists because it's just so hard to settle on a name. So I don't know if you guys remember that Andy changed the band name like 5 times or something, but anyway, whatever.
You were mentioning in one of your recent videos how God speaks today. Was that the one where you were driving along and there was you heard this thing like get out of that lane and then you missed a car that you were about to smash into or something?
Yeah, that's one of those things. I mean, I was reading a paper by Travis Dumsday, and it was something, I don't remember the exact name of the paper, but it's something about evidentially compelling religious experiences. And people talk about religious experiences and they're like, well, I had this, feeling of peace and love, and thank God for that. That's describes kind of my own conversion, what that sort of was like. But sometimes there are more evidentially compelling religious experiences than others. And in this particular case, I was just relaying an experience where I was driving to go see my girlfriend, who's now my wife. I was just going to stop by and visit her while she was working. And it was kind of getting dark and I was driving into the sun a little bit. So the visibility wasn't so good. As it was going down, and I was on a bit of a hill on this highway going full speed in Tulsa, Oklahoma. and there was this car just completely stalled out in the middle of the road. And I didn't see it. I wouldn't have known it was there, but I heard a voice. It wasn't like audible, but it was on the inside of me, but it was very authoritative. And it was like, get in the other lane. And so I jumped lanes real quick. And then I saw this car and people standing outside of the car, which is really scary. And they seemed kind of panicked. And I just missed them. And so thankfully, you know, my life was spared from something like that. And the video was in response to like an atheist saying that, you know, religious experiences, they're not very compelling. Well, again, the argument there is some religious experiences are more compelling than others. And so this is one of those particular things. And I'd like to be able to, like I said on the channel, just be able to share more of those things. And also share, you know, why we can trust the New Testament documents, which contain things like that. I mean, Paul tried to warn those guys like on that ship, like, hey, I think there's going to be much harm if we do this. And they didn't listen. And he ended up getting shipwrecked. And it was a bad situation. But it's things like that, they happen. So,
well, I like how you wove that into that video. And, you know, you mentioned that you were responding to an atheist sort of objection. And I wonder, what is your primary inspiration for what topic you're going to make a video on? Now, there's a number of them that are responding to this, responding to that. But do you have like just this list of different things you want to address, or are there topics that you have studied yourself that you feel like you really have a lot in you want to get out there? What's sort of the process that you go through?
Well, I have a big Trello board of just ideas that I just work on. I probably have dozens of ideas at one time. And because I've written so much with the blog, I had 3 years of blog posts, over 100 posts. It's just kind of easy to go back to those. But what I'm really trying to do is just build a case for the reliability of the Gospels. And there's a lot of different steps that can take. There's internal evidence, you know, things like undesigned coincidences and things like that. There's external evidences like things that are mentioned outside of the Gospels that confirm the Gospels. It could be something stark like what Josephus or Tacitus maybe says about Jesus, or it could be something smaller like Joseph, you know, finding out that Archelaus was ruling over a certain area and being like, I think I'll not go back to Bethlehem. Let's go to Nazareth instead, given Archelaus's horrible reputation of being just a bloody leader. And there's just little things like that. It could be names in the Gospels and how they match up with the kind of names that, you know, we know were what people were named at that time. All these different historical things that kind of go together. I just kind of have a whole step-by-step process that I want to lay out eventually. And I have a playlist that's just growing where I plan on putting more things in there like that. I mean, it could be embarrassing details. It could be all kinds of different things to build a cumulative case for the reliability of the Gospels. I think as Christian apologists, we've fallen really in love with a certain kind of argument for the resurrection of Jesus, which is like the minimal facts. And I like minimal facts to a certain extent. I think it works. But at the same time, you're going to have some difficulty dealing with objections about, well, maybe they just hallucinated something. Maybe they just imagined something that wasn't really there. They had some sort of charismatic experience, and you run into those objections all the time. But if we can establish, not just from like 1 Corinthians 15 and a few passages in Galatians, but if you can establish that the Gospels are historically reliable documents, well, then you can make a much stronger case for the physicality of the resurrection. And so that's what I'm really trying to do with a lot of the videos that I have, is just make a step-by-step cumulative case why we know that the documents are reliable and why they're written by the people who are actually attributed to them. I mean, that's one of the most common objections I hear atheists all the time. Well, you can't trust the Gospels. They're anonymous, which is kind of funny because normally they are anonymous themselves on like Twitter or something else, you know, or whatever. So it's one of those things where I think we can build a much more robust case, historical case than just minimal facts. And so that's one of the aims that I have there with a lot of the videos. The other way I get ideas is just reading Bart Ehrman. He says a lot of things that are good, and he makes a lot of arguments that you're like, what? No, it doesn't say that. And so I think he inspires me a lot to reply to him because he's such a good communicator. He's such a good popularizer. And I think a lot of people are familiar with him. People ask, do I have like a grudge against Bart Ehrman? No, I don't. I actually, from what I understand, he gives a lot of his money to charity, and he seems like kind of a nice guy, even though I think sometimes he could be pretty slippery. But it's just because people are so familiar. So I get ideas just from reading him, and I get ideas just watching these other atheist YouTubers that are out there. If it's about the Bible, I want to hear what they have to say. And if it's something I think is a well put objection, I want to be able to meet that objection. And some of these guys are insanely popular. And so you can kind of gain a little bit of momentum just by referring to people that people who are already seeing on YouTube and familiar with. And they're like, oh, I didn't know how to respond to that. So what does he say about it? So anyway, that's my long-winded ramble there. I'm sorry. But anyways, that's pretty much where I get a lot of the ideas for the topics of the videos.
So you've talked a bit about some atheists that kind of inspire you in a sense, right? Ehrman and some of the top popular internet guys. Who are some Christian thinkers that when you began your journey into apologetics that you referenced, and when you're making these videos and doing the writing, who are some Christian thinkers that have really influenced you and still influence you today?
I would say the number one person is Tim McGrew by far. Tim, when I first got started, as I alluded to earlier, I was really overwhelmed with the amount of information, and there's just so much out there, and you don't know how much of it is good and how much of it is not. And I had mentioned, you guys are probably both members of the Christian Apologetics Alliance group on Facebook, right? Or have been at least at one point, maybe.
Yeah.
There was, in my search, somehow I stumbled across that group, and Tim was a member. And I remember posting something how I lamented that I have a billion kids. Well, I have 3. I had 3 at the time. I have 5 now, but I had 3 at the time, and I just didn't have the resources or the time to go back to school and learn. And Tim picked up on that, and he invited me and several others who had, in conversations, had mentioned something similar. And he kind of took us under his wing, and he created like this whole huge syllabus, which I think used to actually be on your website, Brian. And it was just a reading list of things that we could go through, old books, new books, which cost some money, but not as much money as it would to go to like Houston Baptist or Biola. So he allowed us to be able to come and pick his brain, send him emails, ask him questions and things like that. And the man is just a walking, talking resource library of historical apologetics.
Yeah.
And especially he's an expert on the argument from miracles. And for your listeners who don't know, he teaches philosophy at Western Michigan University. And his wife, Lydia, is a tremendous apologist as well, and has written a number of really good books on the reliability of the Gospels. And so both of them have just been really helpful to me. I can always reach out to them, and they're willing to help. Now, don't go flooding their instant messages if you know these guys. This was before, anyways. But he was just really helpful, and he gave a lot of talks, a lot of things that I just listened to over and over and over again, and just really picked apart a lot of the books that he gave us. And through those books, just found other books, and it just. I've always been given to history. I wasn't like the best student in high school, mostly because I was not a Christian at the time and was too busy getting stoned half the time. But even if I was always good at history, no matter if I wouldn't even have to study for history, I just would sit in the class and be able to get straight A's on my tests because I just was interested and could remember facts easier with history. And so that's, I think, why I gravitated towards Tim's kind of stuff too, because he's just so into history. So Yeah, I would say he's been a huge influence. Another thing that really helped me when I first got started was just listening to Dr. Craig's Defenders classes. I mean, I know he's super popular. I know everybody knows him, and it's just kind of like Dr. Craig, we know Dr. Craig, but I mean, the man is a wealth of information, and that Defenders class is like a ton of history of philosophy and theology and systematic theology and arguments for the existence of God. I mean, you'd be, if you're wanting to learn about apologetics, you'd be kind of dumb not to avail yourself to all those free resources. And so those two really helped me out quite a bit.
Yeah, that video that Brian mentioned that you did responding to the quip, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence was basically Tim McGrew's argument, right?
Yeah, it was his audio. I asked him if he was cool with it.
You just put it in a very understandable way.
Eric, one of the things you mentioned was, at the beginning of your apologetics journey, you're feeling overwhelmed and you're like, well, I don't have time. I've got 3 kids. Well, now you have 5 kids. And, but I mean, you're churning out a lot of great content, and it's amazing to me. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast was I think there's this idea that unless we've gone to have some sort of formal apologetics education, and unless we've been granted some key to the city where we have authority to speak on these things, then how can we ever make a difference? But I mean, basically, kind of what I hear your journey, what you're saying through your journey is that you just wanted to answer your friends in conversation. You didn't like the feeling of not being like able to answer, and then you studied it for yourself, and then you stepped out because you just felt like the leading of the Lord to do that. And now you have a reach in an area where it's like the modern day Areopagus, all the ideas on YouTube. So what would you say to people about, number one, the importance of interacting in these sorts of venues? And then 2, what about this objection like, well, I don't have time. How do you make the time for that?
Yeah, well, to answer the first question, man, we ought to be filling. There's a huge void, really. I just was looking at a few of the channels. Like, there's a guy, Rationality Rules, atheist, popular YouTuber, has over 400,000 subscribers, like 38 million views. You got Cosmic Skeptic, who's, maybe I got those two mixed up. I think he's got 25 million subscribers and over 25 million views or something like that. I'm sure those guys aren't listening, so they're not going to correct me. But you have somebody like Apologia who is just ripping the Bible up one side or the other, and saying all these things that, it just goes it feels like it almost goes unanswered. And he's got like over 10 million views. And so there's this huge opportunity, and some of the things, the arguments that they're offering, some of them are decent. Some of them are just not very good. But I would get messages, on my Facebook all the time, like, nobody's really answering these things. Like, I don't know how to deal with some of this stuff. And so these people, Apologia will even go on Twitter and say, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm trying to reach you, and I'm trying to reach your kids, and I'm trying to deconvert them. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
How dare we not have the same goal on the flip side of trying to reach them and protect them and shield them? Because there are so many people who, are teenagers, Gen Z and older, who are on YouTube, that are looking for these answers. And there are a lot of really good Christian YouTube channels out there, for sure, like Capturing Christianity, Inspiring Philosophy, What Do You Mean, Mike Winger, Trinity Radio. There's a bunch that are really good, but there's still so much more room, especially, I think, with biblical apologetics, although Inspiring Philosophy, I think, and Mike Winger do a great job at biblical apologetics, but there's definitely room for more. And I think we just need to be answering these. I think it would be kind of a dereliction of duty to just let this stuff be churned out by these guys that receive, sometimes, I think there's a video by Trey the Explainer. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not, but he's mostly a science guy, but he's got a video where he basically just regurgitates a lot of Bart Ehrman's arguments on Jesus Interrupted, and it's got over like almost 4 million views. It's a 2-part series, and people are just going to that and they're thinking, well, that must be it. And that these are entertaining videos. These things sound very intelligent, but if we don't respond to these things, I mean, we're just missing out on a huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing, people are Googling for answers. So maybe you're not given, if somebody's not given to speaking, they could still write a blog post. They could still do different things like that. I get all kinds of people that still are searching my content that I've written on topics, just recently, when it was Palm Sunday, I had a bunch of people searching for content on the whole, there's an objection about, did Jesus straddle two donkeys and ride into Jerusalem, and just goofy stuff. But these are things that bother people. And I had like all of a sudden this huge spike in views on that particular blog post. And I thought, well, shoot, people are looking for these answers. I might as well make a video about it too.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's a long-winded answer there, but it's our responsibility to answer these things. These people are very clear. They are trying to reach these people, and we need to be, responding in turn and be trying to reach them as well.
Yeah. One of the things that you do on your channel, Testify, that I really like is that you have a nice mixture of responses to, what we would consider a bit of a more scholarly atheist, such as Bart Ehrman, right? But then you also have responses to kind of more the internet atheist or the internet infidel, whatever you want to call them. And please remember the internet infidel community made up that name. I didn't. So one of the things that I'm wondering is, when you are creating your content, when you're creating those videos, you undoubtedly get responses, right, from the skeptical community. What has been your experience in interacting with skeptics, whether it be through comments, social media? And could you give listeners any kind of guidance as to how they should go into that, should they choose to?
Yeah, well, I do actually. Funny that you asked that. Recently, I shared a little bit of that experience that I shared with you about hearing the voice and avoiding something. And
I'm sure that brought a lot of love down on you.
Yeah, I got ratioed into smithereens. It was, wow, I was not prepared for that kind of response. A lot of these guys were even very popular YouTubers themselves. And it was just like, holy cow, just saying extremely rude things and like, oh, you think you're God's pet and you think you're so special and God spoke to you. You should check yourself at a mental institution and all kinds of stuff.
Being an online apologist, how do you handle that? Learn to not take it personally, but then also respond to it thoughtfully.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And so I realize that a lot of times they're not just attacking me personally, they're attacking the ideas. And so you just learn to not take it personal. With somebody like Godless Engineer, he's kind of more of a provocateur. I have had good interactions with him over Twitter and different things like that. And I think he's kind of a lot of bark, but he's kind of a teddy bear. I hope he hears this. Anyways, he probably won't. But some things are just not worth responding to because in certain cases, it's just going to go into this endless back and forth. And I have a mission of like what kind of content I want to cover. But sometimes if they really capture the argument really well, and it's something that is kind of a common objection that people probably have already thought of anyways, then I will want to take the time to address it. But yeah, you just learn to just not take it personal. If it's a good objection or if it's at least stated well, then yeah, let's spend some time on it. If it's something where it's like, dude, I happen to know you've been replied to on this particular thing repeatedly and it's that information's already out there, then and I know it's going to end in this endless back and forth, I'm probably not going to engage in it as much. So you just kind of really have to learn to pick and choose your battles and not let it ruffle your feathers really, because they just basically, that's their job. I mean, they feel like, hey, this is what I got to respond to. This is him making videos is creating content for me. And so I just have to look at it as, hey, you're just giving me kind of free advertising. Basically, all publicity is kind of good publicity. So.
Right.
I want to circle back to a question I asked. I have this terrible habit of asking multiple questions at once. It's horrible. I asked you a question earlier, and It was a great part one answer, and this is the part two. We never got around to it because I asked it at the same time. So I wanted to find out, if there's people who are considering doing apologetics, but in their own mind they're thinking, well, I don't have time. And Erik, you've got family commitments. What would you say to someone who thinks that that's a true barrier?
I think for some people, it can definitely be a big barrier. You really have to learn to balance, work and family and all of that kind of stuff. And it can be a real challenge. But if something is really important for you, I find that you'll make time for it. And a lot of times it could be an excuse. I mean, if I really want to be watching baseball or my favorite sport or my favorite TV show, I'm probably going to still be able to make the time for it. People make the time for what's important to them, what's valuable to them. And so I would just say re-examine your time. And are you scrolling Facebook when you could be reading books? I mean, I have 5 kids, but I still have time to waste if I let myself. And so let's not waste that time. Let's read a book. Let's listen to a podcast. Let's watch a video. Let's challenge my thinking, make that your hobby instead of just the usual default. Well, the kids are asleep, so I'm going to unwind and watch TV or watch a sitcom or play Madden or whatever. Like you'll make time for what you really love. And so if you care about the people that you're bumping into, like the people that I was working with, and you're going to be able to make that time, and eventually you'll acquire a taste for it if you really love it enough to where you're going to default to it just as you would default to your favorite TV show or sport. And so it just becomes something that's fun. So just you have the time to do what you love if you really think about it. And it's the same way with money. If you really want to spend the money on something, you'll get creative enough to find a way a lot of times.
Interestingly, today I read that scripture where it says, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. This idea of redeeming the time. And I like that you said that, because how many of us would binge watch series of programs and then, I don't have time to pray or read the Bible or something. Yeah, thanks for saying that. What do you think might be the biggest challenges that you do face in doing what you're doing online?
I would say just the biggest challenges is, for me, it was just having the sense that I was supposed to do something, but just getting it through my head that wait, yes, me, not somebody else. I don't have to think, well, I don't have a degree or I'm not necessarily an expert, that I don't have a voice. I think everybody has a unique voice, and you just kind of have to get some confidence, I guess. And so that was one of the big challenges, was just step out and just do something, The other big challenge is, okay, now that I know how to do this, how do I do it? And so I tried a number of different things. I tried talking to the camera. I tried, reading bullet points and going through slides and different things. And none of those things really worked. And so I had to find something that suited my personality and something that I felt comfortable with. And so don't try and be somebody else. Just try and be yourself and find out what's the most comfortable for you to do, and just do that. And then the other challenge was just growth. But with that, I just chose to be consistent. And eventually the growth came. I think I see so many people who start a blog or a YouTube channel, but for one reason or another, they just kind of drop off. And so I would encourage anybody who's thinking about starting any kind of online ministry to say, I'm going to at least do this for 3 years, once a week, no ifs, ands, or buts. Treat it like it's a job. Treat it like you're scheduled to serve in your church. You just have to be there. You have to show up. That way you're just going to force yourself to do it. If you treat it like it's optional, it will get put on the back burner and you'll never do it. And so that was kind of a challenge, is just treating it sort of as optional at first. But realizing that, hey, if God's leading me to do something, I'm going to have to give him an account one day of why I put it off. So I'd rather not have that conversation. And so just just setting your mind to do it and just making it happen.
So I was curious when I was watching your videos, you mentioned that you went to Bible college, but did you receive any kind of training in making those, or did you teach yourself? Did someone show you? Because that's not I admit that's not something I could sit down and do.
You'd be surprised, Chad. It's just a program. It's called VideoScribe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'm just reading scripts into the microphone. I'm talking to you guys. So VideoScribe is not very expensive. It was like less than $200 to invest in a year. It's actually very user friendly. And so I had seen a video by a channel called Wireless Philosophy, and there was I wish I could remember his name. Greg Gansel actually had a video on wireless philosophy, and I thought it was on the problem of evil. I thought this is pretty awesome. This is good. And they had all kinds of different philosophers from different backgrounds. Not all of them were Christians. Some were atheists. And it was all kinds of different philosophy. It wasn't just philosophy of religion. And I was like, what program are they using? Because I could probably do something like that. And I just did a little digging and did the free trial and thought, this is easy enough. I mean, it's challenging at points, but if you have any sort of half decent technical know-how, it's an easy program to use.
And what's it called again?
VideoScribe.
Right.
Yeah, no, I can't draw a stick figure. So yeah, all those animations are just stuff I either are in the program or you can download pictures and as long as they're free to use, you can use them and there's ways that you can turn them into little animations and whatnot. So
the only other thing I was thinking about asking when kind of preparing and thinking through and looking at the great content you're putting out is I was curious. One of the things that I've gotten a bit of pushback for about having like a web-based apologetics ministry through Truth Bomb, and then of course doing the podcast here with Brian is I've actually had one or two people say to me something like, well, that's all well and fine to do things on the internet, but of course you've got to be involved in the community more, or you've got to be sharing the gospel with those around you. And of course, I don't think anybody who does online ministry would argue that you need to do those things. But I think when they're making those types of points, they're essentially kind of trying to downplay the importance of internet ministry, which again I contend is a bit like missionary work. And so I know you've spoke to this a little bit, but what would you say to someone like that who kind of tries to downplay the importance of people who do try to put out great content like you do?
I mean, we're all part of the body. I mean, the head can't say to the foot, I have no need of you, as Paul says. And as far as that goes, I mean, yeah, I'm very involved in my local church, and I think every apologist should be involved to some extent in their local church, but people are on the internet. People are looking for answers. I mean, I get emails. I had somebody in Brazil saying, hey, can I translate this into Portuguese?
Wow.
I have somebody in Turkey say, can I translate these videos into Turkish? There's a lot of Muslims here using Bart Ehrman and for their Muslim apologetics, and we need this. I had a lady in Kenya, Africa say, I'd like to use some of your blog posts as part of my curriculum in my Bible school. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Wow.
And so, and I have gotten, people just recently who said, they were having some doubts about their faith and were questioning things. And because of my channel and another person's channel, that they didn't have doubts in that area. And it really was helpful to them. I just saw Capturing Christianity, which is a much larger channel than I have, where he posted a testimony on Facebook where somebody literally was a former atheist who came to Jesus from watching his channel. I mean, talk to somebody like Inspiring Philosophy who has many testimonies in his comments. You read some of his comments and you want to cry sometimes because they're like, hey, I'm a Christian because of you. It's just like, wow. You look at somebody like David Wood, who's had many people leave comments and say, I left Islam and became a Christian because of your videos. And so to tell that to the people in heaven, that internet when you meet them that internet ministry isn't important, I guess.
Yeah.
It clearly makes an impact. It's just, there's too much evidence to suggest otherwise.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, I think that's awesome. I think the stuff you're creating is high quality, easy to watch, not boring, and it's just great answers. I really appreciate what you're doing, Erik. I want us to pray for our listeners and encourage them as well. So let's pray for them. Father, I thank you for those who are listening, who maybe have found this audio on the internet somehow, and I just pray that you would speak to their hearts, and for those Christians who are listening who are trying to find their place in ministry, that they've felt that this video is somehow this audio is somehow spoken to them, and I just pray that you would just inspire them and give them ideas, give them resources, give them the courage that they need to minister in your name, and we just thank you for that, and bless the work that Erik's doing, and thank you for it. Amen.
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 Well, thanks for joining us, Erik. I want to point people to your stuff, isjesusalive.com. And also, I want to encourage listeners out there, subscribe to the channel Testify on YouTube and support what Erik's doing. He's got a Patreon. It's patreon.com/isjesusalive. You know, he's creating this videos. He's not doing it for profit. He's not doing it because he's a paid minister. You know, he's feeding his family, but he's doing what the Lord has, spoken to him to do. So if that encourages you and you want to continue to see that sort of thing going forward, just give him something. Anyway, thanks so much, Erik. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with that maybe we haven't covered?
No, just again, thanks so much for having me. And I just say, find the area of apologetics that interests you the most. Like I said, with me, it's history. For another person, maybe you really like physics or science. I have a son who loves physics and math, and he watches all these, extremely nerdy math channels, and I don't understand what he's telling me half the time when he's sharing math with me, or physics. But I've introduced him to some of these apologists like Luke Barnes, and who talk about physics and things like that, or he thinks the whole argument from math that is on Dr. Craig is really cool. And so point is, find what interests you. Could be ethics, could be science. There's a number of different avenues to jump on with. And so you don't feel like you got to be the jack of all trades, because you end up usually being the master of none. But just look back to your days of when you were being educated and pick the topic that you just enjoy the most. So
excellent. Well, thanks again for coming on, and all the best.
Yep. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you have a question you'd like us to address, or just a message for us, feedback, good or bad, you can either email us at podcast@apologetics315.com or leave a voice message for us using SpeakPipe. Just go to speakpipe.com/apologetics315 to leave us a message. And remember, if you include a Ghostbusters quote in your question, we guarantee that we'll read it on the podcast, and we also ensure up to 50% better quality answers. Also, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a review in iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice, and please share this episode with a friend if you found it useful. Remember, you can find lots of apologetics resources at apologetics315.com, along with show notes for today's episode. Find Chad's apologetic stuff over at Truthbomb Apologetics. That's truthbomb.blogspot.com. This has been Brian Auten and Chad Gross for the Apologetics 315 podcast, and thanks for listening.
Introducing Peacock, the new free streaming service from NBC Universal. It's hit movies, current shows, live sports, trending bits, and timeless hits. And that's why you can't not watch. Peacock. Watch for free, upgrade for more. Stream now at peacocktv.com. Law & Order SVU streaming now.
Frostbank won't charge fees on overdrafts $100 or less based on qualifying conditions. That means no fees on accidental overdrafts, emergency overdrafts, or even when you sign up for a free audio streaming trial to listen to more than the same 8 CDs you've had in your sedan since '03, but then you never use it because, hey, they're 8 great CDs, and completely forget to cancel the trial until it bills you for a full year. Overdrafts.
None of us is perfect. which is why Frost is introducing $100 overdraft grace if you meet qualifying conditions. Learn more at frostbank.com/overdraft.